I had a unique experience. I had the opportunity to be the private secretary to Kyu Lee Gu, who was the Crown Prince of Korea.
Annyeonghaseyo, this is Mark Peters from the Frog Outside the Well Research Center, and today I have three guests to talk to you about. These are old friends of mine, with the emphasis on old.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We were in Korea together years ago. Brent, when were you first in Korea?
First time was 1965.
And Steve, when were you in Korea?
1966.
66. And when were you in Korea first?
Not until 1974.
74, a little bit later. Now, you two speak Korean.
At one time.
Have you forgotten everything?
Just about.
What's the word for house?
Cheap.
What's the word for car?
자동차.
What's the word for forgiveness?
Forgot.
Done.
You don't pretend to speak Korean.
No, just chokum.
Chokum. Oh, that's good. That's a starter. When you were in Korea, where did you live? What kind of house did you live in?
First place I lived in was a Japanese style house. It was, but it had the on-goal floor.
What kind of house did you live in? Was it a...
It was a modern, at those days, 1966, a modern brick house, but it had on-go floors, and we slept on the floor, and had a little kitchen that was outside.
Right, we lived in these twin towers that are up on Namsan Hill.
Oh, yeah. What did you eat? You remember the food you ate back in the 65, 66 frame?
It was interesting because it seemed like every Saturday we'd go to have bulgogi and more. But mostly it was Korean style. And later on, I discovered that there was a lot more variety in Korean food than I had encountered when I first went there.
You remember yakimeshi?
Yes, yakimeshi was fried rice.
Fried rice. Now what is it in Korean?
I don't know, what do they call it now?
Bogumpap.
Oh, Bogumpap.
What did you think of Koreans? What were Koreans like? They were poor financially, but they weren't poor in spirit.
No, what I remember mostly is how polite and how well-mannered Koreans were, and very well educated for being so poor back in those days.
I remember how well dressed they were, even if that meant one suit of clothes. But they would dress up nicely. I think of your best Korean experience.
Well, for me, they were always very kind. I always found the Koreans very kind and very polite, and they were very pleasant to be with.
Yeah. What did you think of Koreans by the time you got there in 74? How long did you live there?
We went to Korea when we were just first married. We literally had only been married a couple of months. So we were there for 3.5 years. During that time, our first child was born there. We tell her that she was made in Korea. She likes to say that. But what we found were the people were very, very helpful, bent over backwards to make you feel comfortable in their country. And it was different. And we had to, I was a new wife, so I was learning how to cook with the things that were available. I had a unique experience. I had the opportunity to be the private secretary to Kyu Lee Gu, who was the Crown Prince of Korea.
The last Crown Prince of Korea.
Crown Prince, and he was a very gentlemanly man. He had been born and raised his early years in Japan.
Part of the corruption of the Korean royalty.
Exactly, and that was a tough place for him to be put in, because while you knew he loved Korea and wanted to do his part and do his filial duty in his position he was in, he also was not part of the culture. He had not been raised Korean. He spoke very little Korean, in fact. So it was a challenge for him. But I have to say, as a boss, as an employer, he was wonderful.
Oh, what a marvelous experience
it was
to work
great.
for the...
So that was probably my choice experience.
Yeah.
Just working with him.
That's beautiful. Any other choice experience you'd like to share, you old timers?
Well, I thought Korea was really a beautiful place, and I actually grew to enjoy the food. In the beginning, it was kimchi and rice only. That's what I remember every day. Almost every meal was kimchi and rice. And I first thought, well, how can you survive on this? But we got used to it, and it was fine.
Now, Steve, you had multiple incarnations in Korea. You were a missionary, you were a soldier, you were a businessman. All three radically different
Very
experiences.
Different experiences.
Yeah.
Different people, different side of the culture, different part of the language. You know, the language of a missionary is quite different than being in the military and military terminology.
Yeah.
And then business, you had to learn business terms and, you know.
지금도 한국말 잘해요?
조금 할 수 있습니다.
And Brent, you've had several incarnations in Korea as well.
Right.
You were first a missionary, but you went back as a diplomat
Right.
in the embassy.
Right. It was interesting that they always say that you can't go back, and I realized that the Korea that I knew was a missionary when I went back mid-90s to work in the embassy. It was an entirely different place.
The Korea that we knew was a completely different place in the 90s, completely different place in the early 2000s, and a
Yes.
completely different place now.
Now, yes.
Yeah, it really is. Well, it's wonderful to meet you old-timers. I myself am an old-timer, but to reminisce a little bit about the wonderful experiences we had in Korea. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, we'll see you next time, sometime.
Bye.
Great.
Bye.